good evening, and welcome. Tonight I'm really excited to read this book with you. As you can see, it's about the Korean War, but it's not just any regular book about the Korean War. This is a You Choose book. So I've already done one of the You Choose books. There goes a loud car. Sorry about that. It's very late at night, but I do live in a big city. I did a You Choose book before. I'll throw up a card of the last time I did it. I did it about the samurais when I did videos about Japan. Now I'm doing videos about South Korea, so we're going to read about the Korean War. So with the You Choose, we're going to go on some adventures, pick a path, and find out what happens to us if we were fighting in the Korean War, I suppose. So, like I said in my other You Choose book video, normally with the books that I read to you guys, I read them in advance. I check them out from the library. I read them right away, determine, if they're good for a video or not, which for this Curious series, 2 books I checked out didn't make the cut. One I'll recheck out when I do North Korea for sure, but the other one didn't make it. You're not going to hear it. So I read them to make sure they're okay for videos, plan out how I want to present them, things like that. But for these, I have not even opened this book. Even in the last one, sorry, I'm wiggling and making the camera shake, but I'm excited. I haven't even cracked it open. At least for the last one, I at least read the intro, but for this one, I haven't read any of it. I have not opened this book. I'm so excited. So let's get started. Here we go. I'm so excited. Let's find out what happens to us. Okay. So, about your adventure. You are living in 1950 when North Korea shocks the world by invading South Korea. The United States sends troops to help South Korea. How will you be involved in the coming war? In this book, you'll explore how the choices people made meant the difference between life and death. The events you'll experience really happened. I'm excited because I don't really know a lot about the battles in the Korean War exactly. Whereas in the last samurai video I did, so I kind of knew who to trust and what to do. This I totally don't, so we'll find out. Chapter 1 sets the scene, then you choose which path to read. Follow the directions at the bottom of each page. The choices you make will change your outcome. After you finish one path, blah blah blah, we know how to do it. Chapter 1, Invasion of Korea. Like many people, you're stunned when North Korea invades South Korea on June 25th, 1950. The 2 countries were once a joint independent nation, but in 1910 Korea came under Japanese rule. Japan ruled harshly until the United States and its allies defeated the Japanese in 1945, ending World War II. The allies included the Soviet Union, which has since split into Russia and 14 other countries. After the war, Soviet troops held the northern part of the Korean peninsula, while American troops controlled the south. The 38th north parallel of latitude split the 2 regions. The Soviets and the Americans didn't trust each other. Americans believed Soviet leader Joseph Stalin wanted to spread Soviet communism around the world. Under communism, one political party controls the government, which owns most property and businesses. U.S. leaders saw communism as a threat to the world's political and economic freedom. After World War II, the United States and the Soviet Union entered what was called the Cold War. Each side wanted to spread its form of government to other countries. Each wanted to stop the other from gaining more influence in world affairs. The war was cold because the 2 countries didn't fight each other. Instead, each nation helped other countries with their wars. The first hot war of the era came in Korea. Communist leader Kim Il-sung and his allies took control of northern Korea. Syngman Rhee was the top political leader in the south. He strongly opposed communism. In 1948, Rhee won the first presidential election in the newly independent Korea. But the Northern Koreans rejected the election and Rhee's victory. Kim and the communists were then formed their own government. Kim wanted to reunite the country under his rule. That desire led to North Korea's surprise attack on the south. Kim convinced Joseph Stalin to support the invasion. Another communist nation, China, also backed it. The United States supported South Korea. The United Nations also agreed to help the South, and 50 nations eventually sent troops to Korea. You hoped World War II would be the last major war, but now war will once again affect millions of people, including you. Let's see. So we're going to be a pilot in the U.S. Marines, an American who volunteers to fight, and a South Korean civilian. So we're going to start off as a pilot in the U.S. Marines. Flying over Korea. You're living in Chicago when North Korea invades the South. You served as a Marine pilot during World War II. When the war ended, you joined the Marine Corps Reserve. You've continued to receive training. Because of the invasion, the military needs as many soldiers as possible to fight in Korea. You receive orders to leave for the Marine Aviation Base at El Toro, California. You say goodbye to your wife Mary and your children Karen and Joey. After a long train ride, you reach the Marine base in California. The Marines still use the fighter plane you flew in World War II, the F-4U Corsair. It can drop bombs or fire guns at enemies on the ground while battling other planes in the air. The Marines also fly helicopters. The Korean War is the first time helicopters will be widely used in combat. They'll carry officers to the front lines and take wounded troops to mobile army surgical hospital units, or MASH units. One of my favorite TV shows. At El Toro, you meet your commanding officer, Colonel Jonathan Harrison. He says, I see you've flown Corsairs. We need experienced pilots to learn to fly helicopters too. Are you interested? You know the Corsair well, but it might be interesting to fly helicopters, even though they are more dangerous to fly than planes. So do we fly a helicopter or fly the Corsair? I think we should fly the airplane that we know. Honestly. Even though we'd be flying to MASH units. I think we should stick with what we know to play it safe. You begin training again with the Corsair, and in September you sail to Japan. The war has gone badly so far for the Americans and their allies. They've managed to stop the North Koreans at Busan. General Douglas MacArthur is planning a huge amphibious assault. The target is the port city of Incheon on the Yellow Sea. Your first attacks come September 13th. You fly your Corsair off an aircraft carrier. You and other Marine pilots attack the small island of Wormido on the harbor. Some of the planes carry napalm, a chemical that burns almost anything it touches. Your Corsair carries rockets. As the attack begins, you fly low over the island. You fire your rockets at North Korean military trucks. Some of them try to escape, but you swoop down just above the streets. An enemy truck bursts into flames as one of your rockets hits it. Alright. The ground assault follows September 15th. The Marines and ROK troops quickly control Incheon. MacArthur's plan is a success, and now the Americans will push the North Koreans far back to their own country. Before that happens, your commander, Colonel Clarence Scott, approaches you. The Marines are getting some jets, he says. Would you like to learn to fly one? It would be exciting to try something new, but flying a plane you don't know well in combat could be dangerous. Yeah, let's keep flying our plane. That's going well. Sir, I'd prefer to stick with the plane I know. Scott nods and tells you to be ready for more missions. I should say that I'm like a very non-violent person, so I'm just going to keep my head low and try not to get hurt. The war goes better for the UN forces as they capture the North Korean capital of Pyongyang. But in late October, China sends hundreds of thousands of troops to help the North Koreans. They drive the Americans and their allies back south. By late November, the Marines you support are stuck at Chosin Reservoir in the middle of North Korea. Chinese forces have closed in on three sides as temperatures plunge to 30 degrees below zero. If If you touch the metal on your corset, your skin sticks to it. U.S. troops have to fight their way out to reach safety. The Chosin breakout takes almost 2 weeks. You and the other pilots take shifts, so planes are in the air almost around the clock. As the breakout goes on, you are exhausted from flying so much. One day you drop napalm bombs to help Marines under attack. You release one bomb and then another. But the second bomb falls too soon. You're horrified to realize that the chemical will hit some of your own troops. Oh, you radio another pilot, Lieutenant Archie Johnson, and tell him what happened. You can't think about that now, Johnson says. If you can't handle the pressure, maybe you should go back to the base. Yikes. You don't want to make any more mistakes, but the Marines below are still under attack. You can fire your machine guns to help them. I'm in the middle of a mission. I think we should keep it tacking, honestly. Page 34. I'm not going to give up because of one mistake, even though we just napalmed our own men. We've got a job to do, you tell Johnson. Come on. You swing around to attack the Chinese positions. As you start to descend, your engine sputters. Gunfire must have hit the plane. Your only hope is to jump out before the plane crashes. You quickly pull open the canopy. You slide onto the top of the wing and jump. Your parachute opens as it should. As you drift down, you wonder who will find you first, the Americans or the Chinese. You see a group of soldiers standing in a circle, their rifles pointed skyward. No, by their puffy winter coats, you know they're Chinese. No, as you hit the ground, they surround you. You know your next stop will be a prisoner of war camp. No. Well, that ended badly. So much for that. Okay, let's do another path. That ended pretty bad. Okay, so now we're an American who volunteers to fight. Page 39. Choosing to fight. It's 1949 and you're eager to join the military. At 16, you can choose to leave school. You plan to enlist. Your parents don't like the idea. You're too young, your father says. You have to be 17 to enlist, and then you need our permission. I can lie about my age, you say. My friend Jim did it to join the Marines. Dad shrugs his shoulders. Well, since your mind is made up, go ahead and try. Your 18-year-old cousin Harry wants to enlist too. You both decide to join the reserves. Then you can hold a job and get military training at the same time. You'll be a full-blown soldier only if the country goes to war. Well, you and Harry are not sure which military branch to join. The Marines are the toughest fighters, Harry says. Look at how well they did against the Japanese during World War II. But the army is just as important, you say. Plenty of soldiers fought well in Europe. Harry replies, well, they're both good. You decide which we should join. See, the Marines or the army? Let's join the Marines. Oh, it's on this page. You and Harry head to the local Marine recruiting office. When the sergeant asks you your age, you say, I'm 17, sir. You're tall and muscular, so he doesn't question you. He explains that you'll attend a session every week to learn the basics of being a Marine. During the summer, you'll go to a 2-week camp to learn more skills. You take the enlistment forms to your father, who reluctantly signs them. The weekly drills and the summer training camp are not too hard. You like that you're learning something about the Marines while still earning money at a local factory. As June 1950 begins, you're thinking about your second summer training session. But before you go, North Korea invades South Korea. You and Harry receive the news that reservists will not be full-time Marines, and many of you will be going to Korea. You travel to the Marine base at Fort Pendleton in California. The sergeant looks over the training you've had. I think you need more training before you can fight, he says, but you have a choice. Do you think you're ready for combat? No. You and Harry both tell the sergeant you want to stay for more training, But even that won't be as much as a regular Marine would get. The Marines need you in Korea as soon as possible. You and Harry are assigned to different companies. You say goodbye knowing you may never see each other again. You sail from California to Japan, your first stop. Your training continues on the ship with Marines who fought during World War II. You're now a Lance Corporal and will be firing a machine gun. Another Marine, Private Rocky Stern, will carry ammunition for you and other gunners. When you reach South Korea, the Americans and their allies have already pushed the North Koreans back across the 38th parallel. The fighting goes well there until the Chinese enter the war in October to help North Korea. One late November night, you and the rest of your company crawl into the foxholes you've dug. You tighten your sleeping bag around you. The temperature plunges to 20 below zero. You haven't shaved for days and ice clings to your beard. You and Rocky sleep back to back so you can see around you in case of an enemy attack. Suddenly you hear the sound of bugles mixed with the yells of thousands of men. The Chinese are attacking. You and Rocky scramble from your sleeping bags and head for the machine gun. Sergeant Charlie Rizzo, who leads the machine gun squad, wakes the other men. You set up your machine gun and start firing. The bullets cut down the first advancing Chinese, but more rush forward. We have to pull back, Rocky says. There are too many of them. You look for Rizzo, but the sergeant is on the ground and not moving. You think he's dead. Other Marines around you are holding their ground, but some are pulling back without waiting for an order. Do we run or do we keep fighting? I personally would run, so let's go. Let's get out of here. 68. It's gonna say the end. What? Oh, yeah. You jump out of the foxhole and run, joining other Marines trying to escape the Chinese troops. U.S. artillery begins to hit the Chinese. After about 15 minutes of running, you find another Marine unit on a hillside. The troops have taken cover while the artillery shells bombard the enemy. The fighting stops just before dawn. After a few hours of sleep, you awake with a stabbing pain in your stomach. You try to eat breakfast, but you vomit your food. A medic comes over to treat you. I'm not sure what it is, he says. Maybe a stomach virus. But you quickly grow weaker. The medic sends you to an aid station several miles from the fighting. The doctor there examines you. You might have a parasite in your intestines, he says. You need treatment right away or you could die. A helicopter takes you to a hospital. You don't know if you'll ever return to the fighting. All you care about is getting well. Oh. Well, I guess that's the end of that. What an exciting adventure. The Korean War, getting a stomach parasite. Okay. Finally. So we're 0 for 2. Let's see what happens if we're a South Korean civilian. Page 71. Here we go. Fighting for your homeland. You live in a small village near Busan, one of South Korea's major ports. Not far away are islands that belong to Japan. Your family, like many Koreans, suffered under Japanese rule. Your uncle died during a rebellion in 1919. The Japanese killed several thousand Koreans at that time. To the Japanese, Koreans were no better than slaves. You were a boy when Japan attacked the United States in 1941 as part of World War II. Your parents hoped that the Americans would drive the Japanese out of Korea. When that finally happened in 1945, your whole village celebrated. But since 1948, your new country of South Korea has faced another danger. The communists in the north want to control all of Korea. You and your friends discuss whether the communists might start a war. Kim Il-sung is crazy, your friend Tae says. He wants to invade us. But the Americans can stop him, you say. That's not what Mr. Park thinks, Tae says. Mr. Park once studied in Busan and is considered the smartest man in town. He says the communists could take over before the United States could respond. That's because our military is so weak, says another friend, Jin. The weapons we have are old or broken. Maybe the Americans will give us better weapons, Tae says. But until Until then, our country needs more soldiers. I'm going to volunteer for the Republic of Korea Army. Day looks at you and Jin. Will you come with me? You would like to fight for your country, but your father needs your help on his fishing boat. Selling fish is the only way the family makes money. Jin says, I will. He looks at you. What about you? I mean, I think if you pick stay home, that's not automatic the end, so let's volunteer for the army. The three of you go to Busan to enlist. The sergeant is surprised to see volunteers. Usually we have to pull guys off the street to get new soldiers, he says. You all head off for training. Only there's not much of it. Jin was right. The ROK army is in bad shape. My squeaky chair, sorry, I'm adjusting. But American soldiers have trained some of the officers. Others fought with the Chinese against the Japanese during World War II. You learn basic skills such as how to fire a rifle and a mortar. Late in 1949, you and Dae are assigned to an army division near the city of Kaesong, north of the 38th parallel. Jin remains in the south. The border between the two Koreas stretches about 150 miles. You realize that the ROK army doesn't have enough troops to defend it well. The morning of June 25th, 1950, the sound of artillery jerks you awake. The North Koreans are attacking. It's Sunday and many soldiers have been given permission to go home for the weekend. You and the others still at the base spring into action. The North Koreans have more soldiers than the South does, and they have a very effective weapon, Soviet T-34 tanks. You see other ROK soldiers using bazookas to launch rockets at the tanks. The shells just bounce off the tanks' metal armor. As troops realize they can't stop the enemy tanks, many begin to move away. The ROK has no tanks or planes for defense. Dae starts running away. Come on, he yells. Don't just stand there, a soldier named Pig says. Help us. No, I'm gonna run. Sorry, Pig. I'm going with Dae. The end. Okay, cool. Dae's running south away from the 38th parallel. You join him. Shells from enemy tanks and artillery explode all around you. As you run, you wonder if the army will arrest you for desertion. Oh, I didn't think of that. Whoops. I didn't think of that. My bad. Okay, anyway. You might be safer if you can blend in with a group of civilians. You and Dae peel off your military uniforms, keeping only your t-shirts and pants. You join a large group of refugees fleeing the advancing North Koreans. That night, you and Dae find a spot off the road to sleep. You reach the capital city of Seoul early the next day. People there are panicking. Thousands of North Korean troops are heading for Seoul. You find an empty building where you can stay the night. Dae wakes you around midnight. Everyone is leaving the city. We should too. Okay. Oh, there's the end. You get up and join the crowd fleeing the city. After about 2 hours, you reach the bridge across the Han River. You'll keep moving south to your village, but with your next step, the bridge explodes. The ROK army planted explosives to blow up the bridge so the North Koreans couldn't use it. But the order to set off the explosives came too soon. You, Dae, and hundreds of others die in the blast. Darn. Huh. I wonder. We didn't get any good paths that time. That's sad. Well, I'll have to try to read this in my free time, try to find the good endings. See what happens. Anyway, let's find out what really happens at the end of the war. The first year of the Korean War saw the two sides exchange control of large parts of the Korean peninsula. But starting in mid-1951, most of the fighting took place not far from the 38th parallel. That year, the two sides also began to discuss how to end the war. But the fighting dragged on until July 27th, 1953, when North and South Korea signed an armistice agreement. The Korean War claimed many lives. About 44,000 Americans died or were reported missing during the war. More than 270,000 South Koreans were killed or missing. The Chinese and North Koreans had more than 1 million men killed or missing. The war ended with Korea still split into two countries. Separating them is a strip of land about 2.5 miles wide and 115 miles long. It's called the Demilitarized Zone. Neither country can place weapons in this zone, but both sides keep troops just outside it. After the war, communists remained in power in the north. Kim Il-sung cut off the country from most of the rest of the world. The Communist Party tightly controlled the government, and the people couldn't elect their leaders. At times, the country also struggled to feed its own people because Kim spent much of the country's money on its military. The conditions continued after Kim's death when his son Kim Jong-il came to power. In 2011, Kim Jong-il died. His son Kim Jong-un became North Korea's leader. South Korea remained friendly with the United States. For many years, though, the government limited democracy. Free presidential elections were held for the first time in 1987. Beginning in the 1960s, South Korea created a strong economy. Its companies built cars and electronic devices sold around the world. After the war, tensions remained high between the North and South. Because there is no peace treaty, North Korea says the war is still going on. At times, North Korea has launched small military attacks. At other times, its leaders have offered to hold talks to improve relations with both South Korea and the United States. North Korea has also threatened to launch nuclear weapons against other nations, including the United States. Some world leaders still worry about another war someday erupting on the Korean Peninsula. And there's a long timeline. And that's about it. So, kind of a bummer, this book. But maybe by the time this goes up, if I still have this book, if I haven't returned it by the time it goes up, this video goes up, maybe I'll try again. I'll try some different paths. Or some more successful ones. My samurai one was much more successful than this. I got the good ending out of 2 of the 3 paths, so not so lucky this time. But oh well. I hope this video is still relaxing and educational.